So we'll just do a bit of channeling. First group you won't probably know, and the second group, the second person you might. So we'll see.
Just doing one at a time, Jay.
Yeah.
Don't make full promises.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hello. How are you doing?
Thank you for having us.
Pleasure. Maybe just for my own sake, you can tell me your names and.
Sure. My name's Francesco.
Yep.
And I was on Earth an Italian.
Yeah.
Yes, and I'm in the sixth sphere.
Yep.
As you would call it.
Mm-hmm.
And I represent a large group here.
Yeah.
A large group of us who we know you. We witnessed a conversation.
Yes. Which conversation was that?
We had some time ago.
Yeah.
Yes, and we'd like to discuss the matter with you.
Sure.
So the conversation was surrounding the idea that the relationship with God and the knowledge of God is crucial during the earth life.
Mm-hmm.
For us, we act as guides for many people on the earth.
Mm-hmm.
That's a commonality that we all have. So in myself, I was a Catholic when I was on the earth, but many others had many different faith ideas and lifestyles.
Yeah.
Were a part of different thought groups.
Yeah.
And now all of us act as guides for people on earth. And we believe the crucial thing is that we guide people to become loving individuals. And we take that role very seriously.
Mm-hmm.
We believe it's a sacred duty in a way.
Yeah.
And we don't agree with you that we feel that the complication, similar to the discussion you just had just now while we were waiting,
Mm-hmm.
that often the God becomes a complexity for people that stirs them in many ways that may then slow their progress towards a moral lifestyle and love of each other, forgiveness in their hearts, these kinds of principles that we guide people on earth towards, and towards just the care and respect of what is around them and each other and themselves.
Mm-hmm.
We see that as a very important thing for a person to develop in the earth experience.
Yeah.
We understand that as someone enters the spirit life, much more knowledge can be gained, more choices can be made pertaining to having a relationship with God or merely developing oneself for myself, I have a deep respect for God, an awareness of God, but I haven't chosen this path that I know others have chosen.
Yeah. Right. The first thing I'd like to say firstly is that obviously having a moral development, as you know from your own experience, is a very important thing. And the more often than not, people on earth are not very moral, and that is the main reason why
Correct.
they finish up passing in a bad condition, and usually in the hells. And then, of course, they spend many years of pain and suffering trying to get out of that condition, which is also makes their life quite difficult. So I understand where you're coming from in terms of the moral, you feel the moral part of life, which involves how they treat each other and love, and respect and kindness and so forth for each other, is a very important part of life. And without it, you end up with the pain and suffering that we have on earth, isn't it? That's fundamentally the truth.
That's right.
Yeah.
Many problems would be solved with people making some very basic changes.
Yeah.
And that's why initially as guides we try to focus people on these very basic changes. And I should add that one part of the conversation we observed that you had was that you said that there was some harm in what we were doing.
Yeah.
And that is probably the precise thing that we would like to
Disagree with.
analyse it.
Yeah, perhaps we can address that first, that issue of what does actually cause harm versus what, what doesn't harm ever. Because there's as you know through your growth in the spirit world, you would know that you were presented with certain things that helped you morally at the time, but later you sort of even had to give those up to be helped morally further. And an example of that is, you might have been taught initially, for example, that it was important to control your temper, to control your rage. And if you didn't control your rage, particularly when you're dealing with people, you would dump your rage on people. And in the process of dumping your rage on people, you'd harm them, which of course would then darken your own condition and then cause pain and suffering for both them and for yourself. And so you would have learned in that phase that you had to control your temper, no matter what, type of thing. Now, later on, after you'd let go of certain things, you found that your temper was easy to control.
Yes, there was no temper.
That's right, that's right. So if somebody had shown you how to get rid of your temper altogether at the time, and you had actually gone through that at the time, can you see you wouldn't have had to go through the longer period of suffering the control of your temper?
I suppose, I suppose many of us don't see that as a thought experiment. We understand, but we don't really see how that can work on the earth. How a person may
or in the
give
spirit
up.
world, I feel.
Yes.
Either way, you sort of don't feel that's true.
Yes, that's right. And there's other examples that came to mind as you were discussing that. For example, the principle of fidelity, and that was something that morally...
Sexual fidelity.
Fidelity. Fidelity to all things, really, but in this instance,
case,
sexual fidelity. At times, there were times where I needed to hold myself to that principle.
Even though you felt like you wanted to do something else.
Yes, with my wife. And it's something that I feel held me in good stead when I entered the spirit life. In that you didn't act upon those bad feelings and then get a worse condition as a result. That's right. That's right. I maintained a moral lifestyle. And I also grew in my understanding of love through that process. But I'm really saying, well, how fast would you have grown if somebody could have said to you, this particular emotion is what causes you to not have fidelity, and if you could just release that one emotion, then you would have fidelity automatically and you wouldn't have to try. Again, in principle, this seems good, but almost impossible for a person on earth to achieve. See, that's where I disagree. So please, let's discuss. Because I feel it's completely achievable. You can see you can see the history of my own life. Yes. Well, you are rare. Yes. But it's still achievable. Yes. Can you see? So it takes a development of will. We observe. Correct. And we do observe some people do it. But in order to coach a person as a guide into that development of will, we don't understand how to do that. Yeah, that's right. It's difficult as a guide, particularly an invisible one, to coach a person to do that. And this is where things get a bit fuzzy when it comes to what's beneficial for the person and what isn't. And this is something that I'd like to talk about because it is a moral consideration. So go on. Yes, so there's a number of things we would like to discuss with you. So the first, you're talking about the release or expiation of an emotion. And the change of the change of moral condition, which seems to come about more naturally once that process has begun. Yes. There's also this issue that you had raised about the importance of God and receiving God's love. No, just even the acknowledgement of God
Yeah.
we understand that the receiving of God's love is another consideration that you have. So
Yeah.
perhaps that's a third thing.
Yeah.
But these three matters, we feel we're drawn to talk to you about them.
Yep.
We don't see the value in them per se, in that we feel that our methods, well, honestly,
Work.
obviously we believe that they are more effective because that's why we do them.
Yes.
But we are aware that we must always learn, and that was the point that I was going to make about the fidelity.
Yeah.
That I came to then understand. It's like a what I've had to develop in the spirit world is an ability to give up old ideas in a sort of fluid way,
Sort of in a humble way.
while maintaining morality. So,
Yes,
for
yeah.
example, I was very faithful to my wife on earth, and then on our entry to the spirit world also,
Yeah.
until I came to understand that there was a soulmate for
Yeah.
me,
Yeah.
and that it was important for me to give up my attachment to the woman who had been my wife,
Yeah.
and that it wasn't immoral to then sort of have my love for my soulmate.
Yes. In fact, it
and
was
that-
a necessary part of your future happiness.
Yes, so there's a sort of a flexibility that each person must have around their belief system, but they must maintain a position of love in every change. A moral condition must guide the change,
Mm-hmm.
and therefore we must see that the next shift is a moral one. And so those early years in my life when I was on earth, where I was a very faithful, sexually faithful man,
Mm-hmm.
prevented a lot of damage that I might have done to myself and others.
That a lot of people nowadays are doing.
Yes,
Yeah, because they didn't have that moral.
yes.
Yeah.
And while at times that was somewhat of a challenge,
Yeah.
or a fight that
Yeah.
I'm held
A fight
myself
against
to,
yourself almost.
yes. It became less of a fight, as you said,
Yeah.
until it became quite natural. But then I was presented with more truth that a soulmate, there's a soulmate for each person.
Yeah.
And I had to go through certain processes to let go of my wife, but because I could see it was more moral, I felt that I just needed to be flexible and have the ability to give up my old beliefs.
Mm. And this is, I suppose, where I differ from yourselves is that I feel there's something that's moral and then there's not more moral. There is just moral and not moral. Whereas because of your development, the way that you've been developed and the way that you've imbibed more truth and then lived by that truth, you've learnt to do it in a very gradual manner, getting to the point of readiness, you could say, for the next truth. And then, of course, you absorb the next truth over a period of time where you had to deal with certain feelings and thoughts and so forth. And then once you've done that, you then were presented with some more truth again, and then you had to deal with certain feelings and thoughts and so forth. And so substantially to get where you currently are now, you've had to go through this sort of process.
Yes, and it's a little mysterious to me how I could have, in my early earth life,
Mm-hmm.
imbibed the truth of soulmates and become moral about that immediately.
Mm. Well, let's...
as an example.
Yeah,
with
well, let's
many
approach this.
examples.
I think there's some fast ways we can approach the discussion and some slow ways. And some slow ways are that we could discuss for the next few weeks about these matters, or we could come to some resolution of some primary ways of how to establish truth first, and then, and if we could do that, then it might you might find your opinion changing. Does that make sense? So let's.
Yes, and to be clear, we don't want to talk about specific examples.
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
more, we would like to understand why you believe what we're doing is harmful. This is the point.
Yes, I
worry for
I
us.
get that. Yeah. So firstly, let's. And this will be a little. My suggestions are going to be a little against sort of where you want to go initially, but we're going to get there in the end, if I can say it that way. What I would like to do firstly is establish whether God knows all truth or not in your mind. So the way you think Does
Yes.
God know all truth, or
Yes.
does God know just a subset of truth?
No, God knows all truth.
God knows all truth.
Yeah.
So if God knows, logically, God knows all truth.
Oh, sorry,
Go on.
I spoke for myself in
Yeah.
that statement.
Well, let's ask the others too.
Yeah, some of the group here has less of a
Feeling about that.
or less of, they sort of perceive God more as a creator,
Sort of
a creator of truth.
a distant creator, sort of like not an immediate creator, but sort of created the laws, created the structure that you just live in, and God doesn't really interact with you personally and give you truth personally. It's just a creation of the truth that you come to discover.
Yes.
Type
Yes.
of concept.
Yes.
Yep. And I understand that
Some
concept.
variations.
Yeah, some variation of that concept. So, but if God does have all truth, you could say, for God to create the structure of truth, he had to have firstly understood it in himself, and therefore it must be a part of him. That would make logical sense if we thought that way. So let's look at this issue of God firstly and go, well, how important is it to actually be able to get truth from God versus just discovering it through your own actions and behaviour and slow progress? So what I want to do is compare the process of discovering truths by having some connection with God versus the process of discovering truth through your own experimentation. Because if you think about your history, there's been your own experimentation and truth that other people have already established coming to you, but they had to go through experimentation to find that true too, right? And so you fundamentally, the reason why you're in the sixth sphere now is because people had before you discovered the truths that could lead you to that location, and you were willing to listen.
I would say that a fundamental law that all of us agree upon, and we think you agree with this too, is that an individual will not receive truth, will not properly understand truth unless they first desire it.
That's very true.
And so the complication we see is not whether God is the most, obviously God is the most economical person to receive the truth from, as the source of all truth.
Yeah.
However, most people don't want that truth from God.
Yeah, but can you see if you fix that one problem, that you'd probably receive truth a lot more rapidly?
Certainly, but that seems a very tricky thing to help a person on earth with.
Why?
Well, perhaps you can help us. We find it very hard.
I feel that it's tricky to help a person on earth when you yourselves have not dealt with the same problem. So,
and perhaps that is the issue for us, that we do not feel that that's we feel that the ways that we have received truth has been perfectly timed based on the development we were at each point, which caused us to desire the truth at that time, and then the truth always came.
yes.
And looking back over my long life in the spirit world and even in my earth life, the only time truth came to me was when I wanted it, and as soon as I wanted it, it came.
But what if you could want it sooner?
Yes.
Then of course it would have come sooner.
Yes.
And what if you wanted the truth from the source rather than just from other people or from the environment or the universe itself? So
well, that's the tricky thing. We think that it would have come either way. We don't see how it would come quicker from God than it would, because we see at the individual as the magnet. So it may be true that I could have received the truth of soulmates on earth from God, for example, to use the example, but I personally don't feel that I wanted that. And so then even if God could give it to me, I wouldn't have received it.
Yeah, but how much of you not wanting it was because you didn't know it was possible versus if you were educated that you might have wanted it? You see, this is a problem on earth, is that there's not a lot of education about how you can rapidly receive truth. Most education on earth is fundamentally saying you're going to have to experiment to find truth. Fundamentally, that's the belief. And so when you're taught that from a child, naturally you're not going to think there's a faster way of doing it, and so you're going to be drawn into the slowest way of doing it.
Yes, but it's to be clear, especially the more that I have progressed, I don't feel I need to experiment to discover truth. I need to want truth.
Yes.
And then I have experience, and truth comes to me.
Yes, but
it's not a trial and error anymore.
yes, but
does that make
yes,
sense?
I agree. But where has that truth come from? So you're sort of treating it as if it came from you, inside of you internally.
Oh, or others more advanced. I've been very fortunate to have people come to assist me.
Yeah, but actually that's not how most of it came to you. And this is the first thing I'd sort of like to resolve, because if we can resolve how it actually came to you, and you actually engaged how it came to you in a more understanding and proactive manner, then of course, and of course what I'm suggesting is it was coming to you from God without you really understanding it was. But if you engage that in a more proactive manner, you could actually more rapidly receive truth, but also not only more rapidly receive it, but be open to receiving other truths that you haven't yet been open to receiving that may greatly benefit your future existence compared to now. So at the moment, you know that you're limited to the sixth sphere in terms of your progress. Do you understand there is a seventh sphere?
Yes.
Yes. And have you tried to get to that seventh sphere?
No.
No. And why not? If you understand there is one, and you also understand that each new sphere brought you more happiness, surely a desire for the seventh sphere would make sense to develop.
Yes, so there's a number of factors causing us to not
sort of
progress.
Well, and also to be resistant to the next step, maybe?
Yes.
Yep.
Yep.
You want to say what they are, or?
Yes.
Yep.
One of them is that, and we do understand what you're saying about the conscience, because certainly the majority of us experience that.
Yes.
But we do, whether or not we frame it exactly the way that you describe it, we do recognise the commonality in what you're sort of saying.
That you end up all believing the same truth when you're in the same sphere, because you've got to be receiving it from something outside of yourself, don't you?
That's right. And this principle that we all know, that if when you want truth, it comes.
Yeah.
So the issue for us is twofold. One is that we feel that our life is in service to the earth now.
Yes.
We want to help people to attain the condition that we are in, because we know that it is
happier,
very happy,
yeah,
and just eradicate so much unnecessary suffering as well for the future.
Yeah.
So we see that most people are entrenched in patterns and beliefs and ideas that perpetuate pain and suffering continually, not only on earth but into the spirit life. And if people on earth could eradicate some of those very faulty ideas and patterns, then they would eradicate future suffering on the earth. And collectively, we are passionate about that.
Eradicating future suffering
on earth. And we see how simple, actually, it could be to prevent future suffering. And so we're very passionate in our guidance of people. We feel the imperative to help. The second thing is that we do not really wish to have the kind of relationship with the Creator or with God that you yourself have. We are adverse
to that
in some way.
Yes. And do you understand what that way is?
Yes, to greater and lesser degrees. We have different ways of explaining it perhaps, but we don't like the uncontrolled emotionality of it. We don't like we do have a feeling of aversion to that.
So substantially control over your emotion is better, you feel is better than uncontrolled emotion. The people you've met from the seventh sphere or higher, do they seem to you to have uncontrolled emotion?
No, and it's not. Perhaps we don't really want to talk about that part of this right now. We'd like to sort of establish why what we're doing is wrong. Otherwise, there's really no incentive for us to change. We don't really want to change what we're doing, but we do feel if there is some harm in what we're doing, then we're forced to change.
Well, the fastest way to find out whether there's harm in what you're doing is to ask God whether there's harm in what you're doing. And this is what I'm proposing, is that, if God is the creator of all truth and God knows everything, then surely the fastest way to find out whether there is harm in what a person is doing is to ask God whether there's harm. Now, the fastest way to ask God whether there's harm is to sort of develop that relationship with the conscience where you're no longer viewing the conscience as something that's coming from internal or from the universe, but something that's directly shared, truth that's directly shared to you by God as a desire, as God's desire is to share more truth with you so you can become happier. So what it's important to do is that God's fundamentally, if you allow yourself to feel God's feelings, if you feel God's feelings about whether there's harm to the individuals by teaching them to be more loving, what are your feelings there?
Well, no, this is partly what has prompted this conversation, is because it's not clear to us exactly what the harm part is. So
that's what I'm saying.
we do get affirmation feelings or truth from God about a lot of what there's a bit of like
turmoil amongst the group about the subject.
About the name, the phraseology, God, and all of that.
Well, creator, whatever you wish to. You all believe in a creator, don't you?
Yes, and a universal truth, and we do feel that there is harmony with the universal truth in many ways in what we're doing. However, since witnessing your discussion, and since sort of then having more questions, because really we didn't have a question about what we were doing
before discussion.
Before we were privy to that discussion. Then there was some more inquiry, if you like, within ourselves. And there was some
feeling,
mixed message, if you like, that perhaps, we can't pinpoint what the problem is. And we need to let you explain.
That's right.
Because
if you just follow some of my instructions about how to pinpoint the problem, then we'll be able to pinpoint the problem quite rapidly, and you'll be able to understand it quite rapidly, directly from God rather than from me. So what I'm suggesting is, instead of trying to work it out in your own mind with your own logic and everything, the far more rapid way of determining truth is to just ask God what is the truth, and as you said, if you truly desire it in your heart to know, you will get a response that will be very clear. And obviously, if you don't desire it in your heart to know because you're confronted in some way emotionally about it, then obviously the answer won't be very clear. And this is why, up until now, some of you have had clarity and some of you have not, right?
We know. We know that basic law, and we know that, this is the times when we have to do the inquiring or do the exploring or do the... this is why we're here, because clearly we have some problem with what's coming next.
So just breathe for a moment and let's just feel like, okay, we can ask God directly, and God is capable of sharing with us directly whether there is something wrong with what we're currently doing to guide people on earth. So that all we need to do is ask that one question to God. Is there something wrong? We want a definitive yes or no. Is there something wrong with what we're currently doing with people on earth? And then we'll ask a number of other questions which we'll get yes or no answers to as well after that first question.
I think perhaps having this conversation has made me more open, because I did just feel a number of things, and perhaps I could run them by you.
Sure.
So yes.
So the definitive answer from God is
Yes.
yes, there is something wrong.
And so then now my heart inquired some more about
What's
that.
wrong? Yeah,
Yes.
of course.
And it seems there's a problem with teaching people to delay things.
And particularly delay their relationship with God.
I didn't get that. No, I got the.
Well, ask. Is it particularly if they delay their relationship with God that there's problems?
See, I seem to have a personal problem with that question.
Yeah, so you don't really want to ask it.
No.
No, some others have asked it, yes,
Yeah.
in your group, and what have they got as a response?
Yes.
Yeah, so then the question will become, well, what's my personal problem with asking that question? Because obviously that's restricting my ability to listen to the answer, my ability to want the truth about the matter. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what do you feel your personal, you could even ask God, what is the personal problem that you have? And God would be able to share that with you too.
It's just a feeling that I have about we could simplify it and say it's about the authority, but there's certain feelings
but
that
where
I
does
have.
that feeling, let's ask God, where does that feeling come from?
No, yes, I understand. Well, I
Don't really want to know there either.
Well, no, I don't really want to explore that in this context.
Yeah, but it's important to explore because, you see, what I'm getting at is that like God's basically fundamentally saying to the majority of you can feel this now, right? That there is something wrong with the way in which you're currently guiding people.
I suppose now what's happening is a dichotomy inside of me. Is
Yes.
this deep feeling of I just want to understand
What's wrong?
what is the factual thing that is wrong.
Yes.
But obviously now also I feel deeply perturbed about God. I feel that God is an overwhelming entity.
Well, only if you're restricting yourself emotionally is God an overwhelming entity. God doesn't choose to overwhelm anyone who restricts themselves emotionally. Yep. And you can, it's quite clear that God won't work against your will. If you don't want to feel emotions, then God's not going to cause you to feel emotions you don't wish to feel, But it's important to ask these questions, and the reason why it's important to ask these questions is because the truth of the matter is going to have some impact upon the earth as well as yourselves. Do you understand? Because you're guiding people on earth to do a certain thing. If the truth of the matter isn't exactly what you're thinking it is, then can you see your guidance in some manner will be flawed and therefore impact.
Well, yeah, but this is the heart of the question.
Yeah.
Is that we ourselves did certain things on earth that stood us in good stead for our future, even though those things later had to be refined or modified or changed.
Yes, now does God agree that that's the best way of progressing?
Not the best, but it is a way.
Yes, so he's not saying it's not a way, but
it is real progression.
It is real progression to a point, to the point where you currently are. Can it take you beyond the point you are? Ask God that.
No, we know that it can't.
So, therefore it's limited.
But is it wrong?
Well, anything that's limited would be wrong, would it not? Ask God. Is anything limited wrong, or is it just like,
Well, but is not the connection to God must be on the individual's terms, in terms of the individual must choose it or not. Otherwise, this goes against many laws that we have learned.
Correct, and God has never forced a connection with God upon you.
No.
So you know that it is on your terms.
So then how can it be a lesser choice if it is indeed a valid choice?
it's a valid choice, but it's a choice made upon your terms rather than God's potential more expansive terms. As you know, you're a limited being. You have limited understanding. You have limited understanding of the universe. You have limited understanding of God. If you connected with God further, the advantages of such understandings that would come from God may be far beyond your current capacity to understand the benefits of. So, in other words, you're looking at everything from the limitation of your current perspective, and you're saying, we like our current perspective, and I understand why you do, because it's much better than the earth perspective.
Yeah.
So of course you're going to like it. But what if it's compared to God's perspective, like, infinite compared to an ant? What if your potential happiness for your future, as you currently perceive it, is far grander than anything you could possibly imagine in your current state?
It's difficult to imagine.
Correct. But if you ask God, what does God say about it? Is that the potential?
Yeah, it is.
So it is. So by presenting your limitation, can you see there are going to be problems with the limitation that then prevent you from experiencing the expansive joy of future eternal progress because of the limitation being continued? Because you're staying in the state you are in and not wanting to change it. And this is the problem with teaching people on earth the same techniques, is they're going to end up where you are, but not beyond where you are.
But we do teach people that they will have to change.
Yes, and I'm not suggesting you don't. What I'm saying, though, is they will never get beyond where you currently are with what you are teaching them. And what God's sharing with you now is that where you currently are is severely limited in comparison to what God's offering.
And why is that? Why is what we're teaching them? We know we keep going back to this, but
well, if you look at what you're teaching them, is that
tangibly?
you're fundamentally saying to people that the only thing they will ever be is the perfect natural human that loves every other human. That's the only thing they'll ever be. That's what you're teaching them. Now, you need to ask God...
Even if we're not saying that.
Well, that's really what you're teaching them, isn't it? That they must develop morally and and do all the things you've done, which to get to the stage where you are. And you're fundamentally feeling there's nothing beyond where you are. Internally, you feel there's no advantage of going beyond where you are.
So even just our feeling about that has impacted them.
And also impacted your teaching. Because naturally you're not going to teach something that you yourself can't understand.
No, but we do teach people that ideas are just ideas.
Well, does God agree with that? Because I know God doesn't agree with that. If you ask God, are ideas just ideas? No, ideas have power. Ideas can destroy a person's future if you're not careful. Just the wrong idea. It can make a person feel like a future that is a potential is not a potential. An idea can just do that. So ideas are not just ideas. They have power. And they have power to influence people's lives, negatively as well as positively. So ideas are not just ideas. They are living things, really, in a way, causing people to make either substantial change or to stay where they are. Right? So if you ask God about that, God feels, no, ideas are not just ideas. Ideas have to be in alignment with my truth in order for them to be of benefit to the person.
But, okay. But haven't we benefited many people? In that there's less
to the limited
suffering
point where
than
you
there
are currently benefited. Yes.
No.
So I'm not saying you haven't,
Mhm.
and I'm not saying. So let's say you had decided that you wanted to do the opposite to this, which was influence them badly. Well, as you know, you would still be in the hells if you had done such a thing,
Yeah.
right? And also, it would be a severe detriment to the people you were trying to damage, as you observe happening with people in the hells now.
Mhm.
So I'm not suggesting you need to do that. What I'm suggesting is the absence of something also has power. See, at the moment, you've not considered that the absence of God's love in a person's life and the absence of God's absolute truth in a person's life also has power to change and manipulate their future in such a way that they do not consider that they could engage God directly and therefore receive those extra benefits that they would otherwise not have by recognising those truths.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. And this is the reason why when you ask God, God does feel there is something wrong with what you're currently teaching. Now, it's also interesting. Was there a time in the past where what you're currently teaching was not limited? Or in other words, it was as far as the human could go?
Yes.
And was there a time when then God offered another opportunity which is far beyond the current limitations, and that opportunity is what is being neglected by your teachings?
It's hard. There's quite a lot of sort of dissent because you are not answering our questions. You keep asking us to ask questions.
Well, you
And
haven't really given me
resistance.
much of an opportunity to answer your questions even at this point, because you've done most of the talking first.
Yes.
Firstly, but secondly, also, if I did answer them in a way that contradicts your current understanding, which you know is probably going to happen, that's why we're having the conversation, right?
Yes. But
In the end, that means that you possibly won't change unless you've had the personal experience of the benefits. So what I'm trying to encourage in you is to have some personal experience of the benefits yourself with a closer relationship with God.
Yes. And
So that they then know what you're not teaching people on earth to experience.
And there's quite a lot of resistance in me
To that.
To that.
I understand.
I dislike it.
Yeah. Now, the average person in the sixth sphere also believes they didn't have much resistance to anything.
Yes, and I'm aware that this conversation is quite a breaking down of certain
Of resistances, right?
Well, and certain ideas that I've had of myself.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
to a certain degree, I feel that my life until this point has potentially prepared me for even more breaking down of my understandings.
Well, not in the manner that you
But
will need to in order to reach the seventh sphere.
Yes, it's only that I understand that I'm now in another process of breaking down my understanding that it has helped me.
That's right. And the key is to be humble to that process, as you know. But can I just say a few things about the conversation firstly, and I will definitively answer your question if you like. But the definitive answer is not going to help unless you understand the benefits.
No, and really, I wasn't raising that as a criticism of yourself,
Yeah.
more as a flag of the discomfort that I am
That you're
having
feeling,
remaining staying in the conversation.
Yeah.
Because there's an encouragement to engage with something that I am becoming more aware is
That
that
you've
I'm
resisted.
very uncomfortable with.
Yes.
And
yeah.
so the conversation is becoming uncomfortable for me.
Yeah. I understand that, but it's good to stay in these uncomfortable conversations because at the end, usually, you grow from them, right?
Yes. As I said,
As
my
you know
life
from your past experience.
has prepared me.
That's right. So the important part of this, I feel, is understanding what people are missing out on if they don't have the relationship with God. Because it's one thing to share that, you don't have to have the relationship with God, which is actually true, because obviously if you had to, then obviously you wouldn't have free will. So it's actually true to say to people, you don't have to have a relationship with God. And it's also true that how you've been teaching people to progress up until now has been based on the premise that they don't have to have a relationship with God. Right? But also, there is no understanding of the benefits of the relationship with God. So you've neglected teaching people the benefits of the relationship with God.
Mm.
And does that have a consequence? That's the thing to ask God. Does it, for them and for you, does that have a consequence?
Well, again, I receive a yes.
Yeah.
Those of the group who are still here also receive a yes.
Can I ask why the others left? Is it because they were also challenged by the conversation?
Just the discomfort of always seeking out God's answer on some of these questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's quite a lot of...
And fundamentally, I believe that if you do not deal with that discomfort, your progress now to the seventh sphere will be completely unable to be achieved.
Well, many of them left because they're not interested in further progression to the seventh sphere. This is not something that is drawing us.
No, but it's logically not a very logical thing to do. Because if the seventh sphere is available to you, it's guaranteed it's going to be happier than the sixth. It's guaranteed that you're going to know more than you did in the sixth.
I suppose some feel quite confident that that's not the case. I suppose for myself I can, and some of the others who are remaining can see the logic in what you're saying.
Yeah, but if you believe a seventh sphere exists, then the logic of what I'm saying is guaranteed.
Yes.
It's not.
So the others, just to more accurately
didn't believe in the seventh sphere?
No, they believe that that is a parallel existence based on different choices and different desires for one's personal experience.
But ask God whether that's true, because it's not.
Well,
true.
They've left.
Yeah.
So that's obviously what they wish to hold on to.
Yep.
That idea.
Yeah.
But I am open.
But unfortunately,
to the
they're going to continue to damage the people on earth they're guiding now too.
And hopefully, if our discussion goes well, perhaps I can approach them myself to help them if we do establish this benefit properly.
Yeah. Can I
if
make
once
one?
Once I fully understand.
Yeah.
Then I can.
Let's make one statement of one very important truth. Love of people is a very important principle.
Yes.
But love of God is a greater principle.
Yes, and this is something that perhaps I'm coming to feel that I'm limited in.
Yeah.
I felt that I did love God, so.
Yes, and the reason why it's such an important principle is in the process of developing a loving relationship with God. You know there's benefits of developing a loving relationships with people.
Yes.
You know, you get the happiness that you now experience in the sixth sphere by doing that.
Yes.
Right? And the main reason why people on earth are so unhappy is because they don't have loving relationships with people or their environment, right? But if you examine, if God is an infinite being and a loving relationship with God is possible, then you can also see fundamentally that such a relationship may bring you far more benefits than you can possibly imagine that in comparison to your relationship with people, and also will not be mutually exclusive with your relationship with people. In other words, it's not that you love God and you don't love people. It's going to be that you love God in addition to loving people. But the benefits of loving God and also receiving God's love are far greater than the benefits of receiving people's love. Because all a person can do is love you to the ability of what they've designed to love, which is where you currently exist. Without God being a part of them, they can't love beyond that point. But there is a beyond that point. So by presenting to people that progress is happening in a certain way, in the way you've already presented, you're not sharing with them the possibility of the second way of progressing, and also mentioning to them the benefits of such.
So do you think that the earth life, because certainly for myself, and I know many here, once we entered the spirit life, we were presented with the choice of having the relationship more
with God, or
personally with God, we would have called it, or progressing in the way that we have. So do you feel that the earth existence is such a crucial time? And because we feel if only people could just end their perpetual abuse of themselves and each other while they're on the earth, then they're really in a good place when they enter the spirit life.
True, but they'd even be in a better place on earth if they had been presented with the option of the other choice and also had imbibed it on earth.
Yeah, so I guess what I and others are prompting me here is we're understanding that by not acknowledging God, because perhaps I acknowledge God more than some of the others in more of a...
Obviously, because the others that have left
sense.
wouldn't have left otherwise, I feel.
Yes, but even some of the others who are still here, they sort of believe that no matter what the person's open to on earth, that's the way you connect with them. So if they're an atheist, you can still guide them to be more loving and principled, which will help them, and then deal with the issue of all the other things later. And if people believe in Palladians, well then just tell them that you're a Palladian and then get them to be more moral through that course.
Yeah.
And so...
Or if people believe in...
Christianity.
Yeah, whatever.
Then, well, just connect to them and just help them see love through that frame.
Of course they've already chosen.
Yes.
Yeah. Yep.
What,
and if they're
whatever
Muslim
they're
or they're
receptive
Buddhist or
to,
whatever, it all applies. Like,
whatever they're receptive to,
yeah.
Make a connection, help them to be better people.
But many of these beliefs create further belief-based impediments to their acceptance of God as God really is, and acceptance of truth as it really is. And that's the drawback.
Yeah, and that's what we haven't been seeing.
That's right. And you can't really see it until you really start to want to develop sort of what does God feel about it either. That's what I've found anyway, is that while you have your own perspective, the general perspective of most people is we're all good as long as we're all loving. It doesn't matter how you became loving, just be loving and we will be good. Right? But beliefs do matter. They are things that control your future existence and also the pain and suffering of your future existence, as well as the potential pleasure of your future existence. So the way it controls your pain and suffering is if you imbibe as a Christian. So on one hand, as a Christian, you might imbibe the belief that, love is good. Loving your brothers and sisters, being kind and all that, that's all good. But the other parts of being a Christian also involve God is a triune God. There's all these other beliefs, there's a hellfire, there's all these other beliefs that many Christians pass over with these beliefs restricting their future development for a period of time. Does that make sense? So it's very important really that a person actually accepts the truth on earth, not just some truth and other errors. Because whatever they accept as error will all have to be undone. And it's far better to not have to undo something than it is to have to undo it. Right? So this is a big drawback of this kind of philosophy. And I know many six-sphere spirits have the philosophy, and this is why I was having that discussion with the group of people I was having it with, is that when we have this philosophy, we don't understand the limitations we're placing upon futures, the future life of a person. And we don't understand that if you tell a person they're a Palladian, at some point, they're going to have to give up the belief that they are one. And so it does matter that they're being told that. It's better that they're being told, no, you're not a Palladian, but love is a good thing. Become a loving person and a moral person. You still need to do that. But forget about this Palladian thing because it's just untrue, And it's far better to tell them the truth because then they don't have to give up the false beliefs as a part of their future progression. But then on top of that, if we don't present anything about what God is offering as a truth as well, then we're basically fundamentally saying, no matter what you believe, you're just going to end up in the sixth sphere with us, and you're not ever going to get to a seventh sphere, even though that we know there is one. We believe that it's some parallel in existence or whatever. But if you ask God about that, God says, no, it's not. So now I'm in disagreement fundamentally with the creator of the universe about what is truth. And that can never end up good, because all it's going to do is restrict me. Right?
Yeah, and I suppose in my in this quality that I do think that it's hard for me to give up that this wasn't a good quality that I had to gain.
I understand.
In my ability to be stretched out of shape in my current belief systems,
Yeah.
I guess I'm feeling as you're speaking that
Well, you're being
some of
stretched
my-
out of shape in a different way now. That's all really.
yeah,
Yeah.
but it's the same process.
It's the same process, but it's more emotional process now. You can feel that already, can't you? That you can feel in the conversation already that there has been emotional blockages about the concept about God, and in particular how God relates to you.
Well, that's what I was going to say, is that I can feel that the Catholicism that was a part of my earth life
Was very damaging in a lot of ways.
well, I just felt that that's the concept of God that I imbibed in that
Correct.
faith is really the limitation that I'm now experiencing when it comes to asking for truth about these matters from.
That's right. And if you imagine if you didn't have that limitation on earth, what might have been your progress? You
It's
see,
very hard for me to think it would be different.
well, if you ask God, that's a different matter. See, God can see all the potential of the decisions of your choices and the other people's choices, and then what the outcome would have been. And the interesting thing is when you ask God about the potential, what if when you were just like 2 years of age from there on, you were taught the absolute truth that God wanted to share with you, rather than all of these tainted, you could call them, truths? What would have your life on earth have been? And he can even give you a picture right now of what it would have been.
Very different.
Very different. And so what you've believed as a natural progression, sure, I agree that it's a natural progression based on what you were experiencing, but there was this other potential of what you could have experienced if you had been taught these truths right from the beginning of your life that were far beyond anything you've already experienced. And that's the drawback of not understanding the absolute truth. Does that make sense? Yeah. And for me, it's like, this is the damage that we have when we teach people on earth that, you know, it doesn't really matter what you believe as long as you love each other. Because it does matter what they believe, because if and in particular it matters what they believe about God and what God's offering. It really matters there. But it also does matter about what they are taught elsewhere, because unfortunately humans have a habit of attaching their worth to their beliefs. And so if you teach them they're a Palladian, they're going to go around thinking proudly that they're a Palladian, and there's going to be emotions attached to that later, when they are confronted with the truth that they aren't one and they never have been one, they are going to have to give it up, and it's going to be painful, and there's going to be restrictions in place because of that pain. And the same applies whether they're a Christian or a Muslim, and they're going around teaching, well, you know, when you pass, you'll be with Jesus in the right hand of God. And then when they pass, they're not with Jesus at the right hand of God. How do they feel? Devastated. Like, I've been a Christian all my life, and that's what I was promised, and the promise isn't fulfilled. And now there's all this pain and suffering that comes about because the promise isn't fulfilled. And this is the trouble with teaching like half-truths, is that there's promises made in the half-truths that are all going to damage the person's future in terms of create pain and suffering for their future.
I'm feeling quite sad now, actually.
Well, you're in a position right now of being able to influence people on earth in a very positive manner if you yourself see the drawbacks of how the influence has been given right now. So I wouldn't have such a negative view. There are, of course, feelings you need to feel, but the reality is, you know, if you understand the full truth and the impact of the full truth and the beauty of the absolute truth, and you understand that and the power that's going to bring everybody's life, if you understand all of those things, can you see, you can then share with people how, you know, in a passionate manner, you can share with people how these things are going to impact their life. And that's going to have a hugely positive effect. You imagine if every six-sphere spirit who is currently doing what they're currently doing
With the earth.
with the earth, you know, basically telling people, oh, it doesn't matter what you believe as long as you love each other, right? And they stopped doing that and they said, no, what you loving each other is really important and you must do this. But in addition to that, these false beliefs you have are stopping you from loving each other. You know, the Christian has the belief, he's a Christian so he's saved. That means the Muslim isn't saved. That's stopping him from loving the Muslim. You know, the Jews believe they're the chosen race. That's stopping them from loving other races. You know, there's all these things, beliefs that are stopping them from loving. So if you could share all that, and imagine all of you as a six-sphere spirit, all of the six-sphere spirits who are guiding people, and there's a lot, as you know, guiding all these people on earth, trying to get the earth more loving. If all of you had the same view, imagine the power of that. Like, you know your own power, right? You know your power that you have to influence people in a positive manner. You imagine if all of you chose to do it, how and the impact that would have. And they would all then begin examining not only their love of each other, they would look at also, they'd start examining their love of the environment, which would be a huge positive boon to the earth. And then on top of that, they would look at the potential of having a loving relationship with God.
It seems to me, though, for myself, and it seems it's for everyone, that to commence that work, we must first deal with our feelings about God,
Really?
what it is to relate to God, and what it is to be loved by God.
Yeah, and if you feel your feelings, you can see fundamentally at the moment you feel that God may overcome you, and you sort of will lose your personality and your existence by being overcome by a more powerful entity, and that's not going to happen. In fact, you can ask God directly whether that's going to happen, and God will share with you quite clearly that's not going to happen. So it's just a fear that you've imbibed that needs to be released, rather than a real problem. You know?
Well, thank you.
Yeah. And hopefully you can share that with the others of the group who left too, because, you know, my feeling is that there's so much potential. Like, you know, how many people are in the sixth sphere now? It must be, like, there's a solid 20 billion or so, isn't there? Can you imagine if there's more sixth sphere spirits than there are people on earth, but by a factor of what, 3 or 4? And you imagine if all of those people influenced people on earth in this manner that I'm suggesting, how rapidly things could potentially change, and also how rapidly they might get rid of some of their negative spirit influences.
Do you think that we'd still be interested in the earth, though? It's sort of, somehow it seems that this perfection of ourselves and the knowledge of that we had perfected the human love, at least for myself, made me very interested in the earth, and others here sharing this.
Which is great.
And helping the earth to perfect their human love.
Yeah. And just this feeling you had that you wanted to help people in a more unfortunate circumstance than yourself is a beautiful feeling. God loves that.
But do you think that we would be so interested in the earth if we now turn ourselves towards progression and towards God?
We'll ask God.
Well, it's something that I must answer for myself, I suppose.
Well, I think the answer is going to be pretty clear. Is how interested is God in the earth changing these views? And then if you ask,
something that I need to feel.
You need to feel about.
I need to go through some things.
Feelings.
With God.
Yeah. But let's get some of the seventh sphere spirits to come. How passionate are they about changing things on earth?
Yeah.
So they're even more passionate, aren't they? Like if you feel the energy they have about it, and the joy they have about it.
Yeah, they do. They do.
So it's unlikely you'll lose this desire. How passionate do you feel I am about it?
Well, obviously you're on there. But perhaps there'll be different things that different people focus on. Perhaps we'll focus on correcting things in the spirit world as well.
Well, I think you'll do both. I think when you've got the power to do...
I think for myself now, I mean, I know I've always been a very passionate person on earth and here in the spirit life. It's always a part of myself that's always been very
Yeah.
But I think really on this discussion, I think my question came because I already feel less interested in the earth, but I feel more passionate about changing things here in the sixth sphere.
Yeah, well, you can see that changing things in the sixth sphere would have a very positive impact on Earth. Because you can see that a lot of the limitations of what the sixth sphere spirits are teaching Earth would also then be relieved.
Most of the guidance that happens on the Earth is from this sphere or below.
Yeah, I agree.
We don't witness many people from in a greater development or in a different development than ourselves guiding people upon the Earth, which is partly why
partly that's because you can't see them, though.
We came with the questions that we had.
Yeah, but that's partly because you can't see the celestial spirits who are guiding Earth.
Why would we see our brothers and sisters here in the seventh sphere?
Only because they're toning down their bodies in order for you to see them.
Okay.
If we ask even some of the ones in the seventh sphere to brighten themselves up to their normal brightness.
But it's quite amazing, but wouldn't we see that on Earth?
Well, you get to a point where there's so much brightness you can't even see it.
Earth is not bright.
No, but those people have to tone. The people, the celestial spirits, are under the same law you are when you visit Earth.
Yeah.
Which is that you have to tone your condition, don't you, to match the condition of the location. So you just can't see the ones that are influencing the Earth. You can't determine the difference between yourself and them.
Or perhaps it's more clear for us to say that what we see in the majority of religious faiths on the Earth who even purport a belief in God is that six sphere spirits are guiding the members of those.
Very true. That's very true.
So that's what we mean, the guidance, the direct one-on-one guidance.
Well, because that's in harmony with the law, as we've already stated.
That's right.
That's right.
So I was just furthering your point that if the sixth sphere were to change, perhaps we would have more. It's questions to be answered.
Yeah,
anyway.
I feel you'll have more feelings of wanting to guide people in a loving manner.
It's just making the connection with the people on Earth. Perhaps there would be more ability to make more connections with the people on the Earth if the sixth sphere position on God changed. But at the moment, it seems in harmony with the Earth's position on God.
It is. And that's a big problem.
This is why I was saying that we're mainly guiding the people on Earth as the people in this sphere. So
Correct.
if we changed in this sphere, then perhaps we could change the
lower
situation.
spheres too, as
Yes,
well as the
but
Earth.
also
Because
the
as you
guidance.
know, a lot of the guidance you're giving is also to people in the fifth and the fourth and the third and the second and so forth.
Well, we have not been, but
No,
certainly
but people who you advise have been.
yes, not me personally, but
No,
yes. Yeah.
but, I mean, as a group, people who you advise. People who six sphere spirits advise are generally helping those people. Yeah. And this is the trouble, is you've got a sort of trickle down of information all coming from not the complete information. And unless it's complete, it's going to have its limitations. Yeah. So I think, you'll find that you'll have more influence. You will also find that you'll want to have more influence as well. And you'll also find that you enjoy it more because you know more of the truth yourself and you're passionate about it more. So there'll be a lot of advantages I think you'll feel, but I do understand that you do need to go through some feelings about it first,
Yeah.
I get that. And particularly bearing in mind that, when you start feeling about the potential drawbacks of what you've been doing, there's obviously feelings that come up about that as well, that you'll have to feel about as well in order to change. But I'm suggesting that all of those things, when you do them, because I'm pretty confident you'll do them, you'll feel very differently than you do now. At the moment, there's a sort of bit of pessimism almost about whether you'll be able to influence people on Earth in a positive manner if you make these changes yourself. And I feel quite strongly that you will be able to influence them more positively.
Yeah, I feel that I will make the changes. I agree. There's this stretching out process that aware of, and I understand it's going to be more emotional than I'm used to, but
Yeah.
I feel confident that I will, but I do feel quite passionate that I want to work here in this sphere
Yeah, there's a lot of work to be done in the sixth sphere.
in order to benefit the earth, actually.
Yeah.
So perhaps
Yeah.
it means less involvement in the earth for a time, which I actually do feel quite sad about, because I love the earth.
Yeah, I don't know about that, because I think you will find that many of the seventh sphere or higher spirits find the sixth sphere spirits difficult to motivate, and they actually find people on earth easier to motivate. And there's a good reason for that.
What is that reason?
Well, there's a number of good reasons, really. One is that the sixth sphere spirits have used a method of progress to reach the sixth sphere that has now become quite indoctrinated within themselves psychologically and emotionally. And so you're trying to overcome that in order to encourage them to grow beyond the sixth sphere.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas people on earth haven't got that indoctrination for the most part. They've only got a little bit of indoctrination in different areas, not a lot. And so oftentimes you can influence them more positively in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
Secondly, there's the issues of belief systems, that if you teach people on earth belief systems that are accurate, then of course they don't have to go through all of the undoing of the belief system
Mm-hmm.
that most of the sixth sphere spirits have experienced in their own progression. And you know that most of the sixth sphere spirits still hold on to a lot of belief systems about God, that when you ask God directly about those systems, they're all false.
Mm.
And so there's a lot of sins being committed against God. And God isn't punishing about those sins. He's just saying you can't progress beyond the sixth sphere unless you deal with those sins. And you can't get the benefit of going beyond the sixth sphere unless you deal with those sins. So by the time you reach the sixth sphere, you're no sin against your brother and sister, but there's still the sins against God to consider.
Mm.
And if you consider them early in life, things go better.
Mm-hmm.
And this is why it's easier sometimes to influence people on earth to consider those things than it is to convince the sixth sphere spirit to do those things.
Yeah. Okay. So there's I'll be interested, and perhaps I'll reassess my claim that it's mainly sixth sphere spirits influencing the earth.
There's also the issue of you know, how long have you been in the spirit world now? 500 years. There's many times that I visited the six spheres to talk to groups of people. Did you ever attend one of my talks?
No.
No. And this is the other problem, is the majority of people in the sixth sphere are not attracted to listen to a person from the seventh sphere or beyond about the truths about God because of the same limitations you've been experiencing yourself. Yeah. And you can see that's been severely limiting on the sixth sphere as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do. It's great to meet you, Francesco, wasn't it? Yeah. Thank you, friend.
Yeah, and good luck trying to help your friends who also, you know, I feel you'll find, given the amount of time, the time you've been in the sixth sphere condition, because you've been there a while now, haven't you? Like 400 and something years, from what I can.
But yeah,
Close.
a bit less.
Bit less.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, 400, say.
Yeah.
Thereabouts.
Yeah. And and some of the others have been there much longer, even, haven't they? Like almost from the first century period of time.
I'm the young one
You're the young
amongst
one.
them
Yeah, that's
who's
right.
willing to come and be the spokesperson.
Yeah, and you can see the older or longer you get entrenched in a view, oftentimes you maintain that view much more strongly until a point of discontent. And so usually that discontent arises for most people in the sixth sphere from anywhere from 2,000 to 10,000 years in the sixth sphere. The discontent starts, you know, but it's good that your discontent has arrived a bit earlier.
Well, thank you, and sorry about dominating a little the conversation, but
No,
there's so much.
if you look at every conversation I've had with six sphere spirits up and down, you'll see it's the same. There's the panic that's involved generally that they don't understand when it comes to God. And when it starts coming up, you got to talk and you use your intellect a lot to reason on the matter, but there's not much consideration of, well, just ask God about it, you know.
Yeah, I feel quite heartbroken, if I'm honest, about this feelings with God that I am aware now that I need to delve into.
But a lot of it is due to false beliefs on earth, you know, unfortunately, about God, you know, that have been on earth for, you know, as you know, tens of thousands of years, you know. And something that began with the first human couple, really. And, you know, something that, you know, there's a large group of celestial spirits who are above the eighth sphere, you know, in the eighth sphere or above, who are trying to correct, you know. And I'm sure you'll find yourself joining them.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see, but I certainly feel once I'm through this patch, I feel I'll be quite passionate again.
It'll just be a tough patch while you're going through the feelings. But these feelings have been there right from your earth life, actually. And unfortunately, you know, the Catholic faith is a pretty restrictive faith on belief about God, you know, just like most Christian faiths have been. And of course they all have an impact. It's the same with the Muslim faith and many of the other faiths on earth. They all have a deep impact and a sort of deep, so you could almost say psychological scarring on the individual about their concepts of God that need to be addressed if you want to have a relationship with God. Yeah.
Okay.
No worries, my brother.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye. Do any of you guys have any questions you'd like to ask me about that? Nikki, you can ask.
Thanks for that, guys. That was good. For two questions. First one, he kind of falsified himself, did he, at times to people on earth?
Not really. No. It's more.
What do you say?
No, I don't understand really why I say that. The feeling he had was this: people on earth want to believe what they want to believe. As long as that belief incorporates love and truth in some way and incorporates moral development, then it's okay. If it doesn't incorporate moral development, then we need to help them some way or another.
And also he just focused on moral development with people, not
right.
on their beliefs.
Yeah.
Okay,
So he sort of doesn't
Not on their
care about their belief. It almost felt like their beliefs didn't matter.
Right.
Well, except for their
Except
beliefs
for their moral
pertaining
beliefs.
to morality. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Except for their belief about what is true in terms of what is not emotionally, but true about love, you know, in terms of how to share.
Which part of the discussion gave you the impression that he falsified himself?
It was more like near the start, I think, where he was kind of saying how, like, with the Christian, I would, like, talk to them about love, but through the Christian thing. But then I just think I would have misunderstood that by them feeling like, he wasn't honest saying he's not a Christian or he's not a Buddhist or a Muslim or whatever. So that's the bit where...
the feeling they have in the sixth sphere, it doesn't matter which one you are.
Right.
What matters is that you love your brothers and sisters. That's what matters. And that's the limitation of this belief, of course, that, you know, it does matter what you believe, but the average person in the sixth sphere doesn't really feel it matters what you believe about God. What matters is what you do about love.
Right.
You know, that's how they got to the sixth sphere, by caring about love. You know, that's how they got there.
And the rapport exists, so he never guided someone who was a Buddhist or a New Age person, because there wasn't really the rapport there anyway, you know, so...
But he's obviously guided Catholics, right?
Yeah. Many, yeah. But there was other people there who had guided all different... they are actively guiding people.
And still sort of in some way consider themselves to be Muslim or Buddhist or...
Yeah.
Just refined.
Just refined.
Yeah.
So that they love everybody.
Yes.
Yeah. And don't believe that their beliefs is any better than somebody else's beliefs.
Yeah, so he more kind of used it as like an entry point to build the rapport with the people.
Correct.
Rather than him saying, I'm you know.
And this is how many people are guided on earth, by there being some kind of rapport with a spirit in the spirit world who wishes them to become more loving, but who needs to develop some kind of rapport due to a common belief that they held on earth.
It is
So-
it's very, very rare for a person on earth to say, oh, I have a guide.
Most.
Who thinks that, really? Did you, before you
No
heard divine
chance.
truth?
No chance.
So people are being guided without going, oh, I've got a guide who's so
It's only New Age people who believe that nowadays, generally.
if some,
Maybe.
some people believe in it, but
Mm.
so it's not really like they're coming along and going, hi, my name's John and I'm
I'm
going to
your
be your guide, for your life on earth. So in that way, they're not.
But they're trying to guide people on earth to be more loving, because they know the earth's in a mess, and they know that a lot of people on earth are very unhappy and sad and depressed and angry and bitter and twisted, and they know that a lot of it they can solve themselves, and so they try to help them solve it themselves. Of course, there's not a lot of encouragement in the environment to solve the problem, but this is where they feel they can be quite effective. Yeah. The drawback, though, is the false beliefs, or the allowance of the false beliefs about God. Because if a person, as I illustrated to Francesco, if a person on earth understood the truth about God, even if they chose to not follow it, there would be benefits in their spirit world life. But even more, if they chose to follow it on earth, their whole life changes, and their spirit life changes markedly. Like most people who accept God truthfully, and receive God's love on earth truthfully, not all the people who think they have, but I mean the ones who do, generally don't even enter the hells ever. So already that's the alleviation of a lot of burden of potential future suffering.
When he was passionate about trying to help people get through that in his way, that he was doing it with his friends and stuff.
Yeah, you see, for him, because of the blockages he had with God, he wasn't ever going to encourage the relationship with God. Does that make sense? So, but he was doing his best to encourage love, even though he wasn't going to encourage the relationship with God. And that's not a problem. It's good that he encouraged love, because there's many spirits in the spirit world in the hells that discourage it. Right? So it's very good that you've got 6 sphere spirits. In fact, the earth would markedly be much the same as it was like 5,000 years ago, but with 8 billion people on it, if 6 sphere spirits didn't encourage the earth to love, actually. Without the effort of the 6 sphere spirits currently, the earth would have already probably experienced a nuclear holocaust. Yeah.
Wow.
Right? Because mostly it's the 6 sphere spirits that have prevented all of those events. All of the events like chemical holocaust, nuclear holocaust, all of these events fundamentally have been prevented by 6 sphere spirits trying to help people on earth to be more loving. That makes sense? Because they are the ones that have the most influence over people's minds on earth. Because most people on earth don't want to be emotionally influenced. They just want to be intellectually influenced.
So in that way as well, it's like he's not really impacting on the free will.
No, he's fully in harmony with the freedom of people on earth.
Yeah.
And where he possibly can be, he is, So, no, there's no problem there. It's just that there's a lack of understanding of the full truth, and there's also this common feeling in the 6th sphere that your beliefs don't matter, and they do. They cause a lot of pain and suffering, and your beliefs about God potentially cause the most pain and suffering, because they are spiritual beliefs, and therefore the most powerful and have the most powerful impact on your life. Yeah, makes sense, Nikki?
Thanks, guys. Yeah.
Brittany, up the back. If we go up the back, go to Brittany, and then down to Al.
I think if I understand him right, he said that he was presented with the choice to have a relationship with God when he entered the spirit world.
Yes, everybody is. Pretty
I
much.
just wanted to know more about that and if everybody is and how it happens.
Well, there's an attempt to present everybody with it, is the best way of saying it. Not everybody even wants to listen to the conversation. So
And he was saying to me, it wasn't immediate.
No.
It wasn't like, oh, I've passed and now I'm presented with it. It's more like, I got there, I got the lay of the land, I got that. I decided I wanted to progress. He's saying that
Once
usually
you
that
decide
happens
that.
once you decide you want to progress consciously. I want this. Usually, someone comes and gives you the option, or at least educates you about the two different ways to progress. You're at least exposed to that knowledge, he was saying. Yeah.
depending upon whether you're open to the concept of God at all.
Yeah.
Because if you're not open to the concept of God at all, you won't be presented with the concept of God either. So in his case, because he was brought up Catholic,
Yeah.
he was open to the concept of God on earth, open to the concept of God when he passed, then anybody who's open to the concept of God will be presented with the choice to progress these two ways.
Yeah.
Whether they listen to the conversation very much at all is debatable.
Yeah, and he's saying usually most people are pretty set on which way they're going to go already.
Yeah.
So it's not, and some of his other group there really weren't even conscious of being presented with a
No.
choice, but he certainly was.
Yeah.
Which is partly why I think he was more able to have the conversation with Jesus, even though it was so really hard for him. But that this idea that there was sort of another path had been with him for a very long time, but he'd actively decided that's not for me.
Against it.
Yeah, because of his feelings with God.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate because, you know, a lot of times a person spends, like he had like 500 years in the spirit world and hadn't even though they're brought up to believe in God on earth as a concept, there is really no heart for God because of all of different reasons. There's a lot of reasons. And as a result of those false emotional beliefs, you don't even think to do it. And then of course you bear the consequence of not doing it, which is delays in time and effort, and you know, effort being put in the wrong direction at times, and there's all sorts of you could say drawbacks because of not being presented and not having the feeling for it, you know, right from the beginning. Yeah. Makes sense, really. Yeah. So down to Owen, then we on this side, if we go up the back road, and then on this side down to Connie.
I was just going to say, you've been talking a lot about beliefs and ideas and how they're the most powerful things.
Yeah.
And this was just such a fine example.
Yeah.
It really was laid bare how that's affected them and us.
Not only that, you could see, couldn't you, the connection between the belief and the emotions he didn't want to feel. It's very important to understand this. The majority of people on earth do not grasp that they're not going to accept a belief emotionally until they feel differently. You know that, and it's a very important concept. And you could see there was a lot of feelings. Francesco was having to feel even to stay in the conversation that most people would have just run away from, to be honest. You know, and if you were a spirit in a lower condition, probably would have got angry about.
Yeah, it just seemed the consequence is such a painful process that, you know, if you hold on to
but this is
something
why
like
God
that.
has so much compassion for you, for people, because He knows that a lot of your belief systems that you've imbibed are not necessarily the result of your choice to imbibe them. They've been, you know, many of these belief systems, and particularly the spiritual ones, have been indoctrinated. You know, they've been doctrines presented over and over and over again to you throughout your life, and you know, indoctrination is really manipulation, and God's aware of the amount of manipulation that goes on earth to indoctrinate religious beliefs on people, but also God's aware of all of the damage it causes, and which is the reason why it's so important to understand the absolute truth rather than just have the view it doesn't matter what they believe as long as they love, you know. If you look at the average person on earth, they fundamentally believe the same thing. It doesn't matter what you believe as long as you love. Not understanding the penalties of false beliefs on their future, or even on their current life.
Yeah, your current life is very affected by it, isn't it?
You brought up to believe that because you're a Jew or because you're a Christian, you're superior to a Muslim, is going to have a severe impact on how you treat Muslims.
Or
Yeah.
because you're white.
Same thing. Because I'm white versus black versus, Oriental or some other, race, you're superior. That's going to have a severe impact upon how racist you are with everybody, and therefore how loving you are, And this is the thing that most people on earth don't grasp, is that spiritual belief systems have the biggest impact on how you love other people.
Couple of questions.
Yep.
That person who comes to you when you've expressed some sort of desire to give you those two
Grow,
choices.
to change.
To grow, to change. Is that person a divine love spirit, or
Depends how
necessarily?
you desire to grow or change.
Yes, because if they're offering God as an option.
Well, see, at the
Wait,
time,
so-
so you're asking about the one who comes to you first.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, so the one who comes to you first generally knows about both paths,
Yes.
and therefore is generally a celestial or a
Yes,
spirit
that's
associated with, the divine love path.
Yeah.
Because they can feel in the person a desire that they wish to grow, and so generally that person, if you're open to a concept of God, of course it's dependent upon that, that person will present both concepts. Your ability to hear them is severely curtailed by the emotional state you're in. Yeah.
Francesco was saying to me that he actually met two different people who'd made the choice in different directions.
Oh, yeah.
Like one who
One who
chose
did one way, one who did the
Yep.
other.
Yeah.
when he was first deciding, okay, I want to develop, and I can see that that's a possibility here, and that neither one was in a highly progressed state. They were in maybe the third and fourth spheres,
Okay.
but they helped him understand very plainly what would be involved in each.
Yeah. And I also wondered, did he say how big the group was?
50,000, he told me initially. Yeah.
And are they influencing people all over the world, just randomly, or
Yep.
are they focused in?
Sometimes they're focused, but
Yeah.
mostly randomly.
But they were brought together all so they don't hang out together all the time,
No.
but they were brought together by this question of
By the conversation.
the niggle, the discontent
Yes.
maybe of
I forget
why.
where we had the conversation now.
It was just you and I had the conversation.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
I was talking to Mary about,
Were we talking about
yeah, you and I were talking, I think.
just about how beliefs matter.
How,
and people
not just
don't
how beliefs
understand.
matter, but also how six-sphere spirits even don't understand how
Yeah.
beliefs matter.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and how most people on earth don't understand
And
the
we were
impact of
ta-
their beliefs.
And we were also talking about the negative impact that we're feeling from six-sphere spirits on the earth about receiving divine love.
Yeah.
And we were talking about how many six-sphere spirits are sort of almost against people on earth receiving divine love, and the negative impact that was having. And we talked about it a bit with our spirit friends as well, because we're trying to work out, well, what can we do about these things? Because if we have conversations with groups like Francesco's group, there's a chance that some of them or many of them might change. And if they change, then what impact might they then have on this whole concept on earth that it doesn't matter what you believe? Because it's a very damaging concept. It does matter what you believe. Yeah.
Thank you.
We're down the corner.
In that conversation with Francesco, you were telling him about how the celestial spirits reduce their brightness when they go to help others, just like they do.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any way that Francesco could identify which ones are the celestial spirits at the time, just so he can
Well, he could.
He can.
Oh, yeah.
He told me he can tell the difference.
So you can see them.
But it's not based on sight.
It's a feeling, sort of. Yeah, I was wondering if you could observe what they do compared to what he's doing, so you might get a bit of
Well,
a difference.
not many of the people on earth want those spirits around them.
Ah, yeah.
That was his
So
point.
that was his
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
So it's
Not many
that
people
many.
on earth want them, although there are a lot of spirits helping people on earth, but not many people on earth want them to be there. So if you're a Catholic Christian, you're probably not going to want, unless you've got an emotional connection with God, you're probably not going to want a divine love spirit to help you progress,
Yeah.
right? You're probably going to want somebody who was a Catholic on earth,
Who is progressed.
who is progressed, someone like Francesco who's progressed, to come and help you.
Yeah, but that, what would the percentage be with celestials helping people on earth? Not much, probably.
With direct guidance, he was telling me it's not very
Hardly
many.
any.
Yeah.
There's hardly any celestial spirits able to influence a person on earth at all. There's very few. But they have huge influences on earth in a more invisible state, which he doesn't see. So in other words, when you're helping the person on earth, you've got to lower yourself to their condition and you can see them. But when you're helping people on earth in a generalised way, without influencing them in belief systems, you can actually do it in an invisible way. So there's a lot of that going on between celestial spirits and people on earth that he can't see.
What would be an example of that?
There's probably a lot of, let's say, one of the ways a lot of people on earth are unloving are to do with their sexual morality. So these many celestial spirits are constantly trying to influence circumstances around a person, not the person themselves, but the circumstances around a person, in such a way that they see that their immoral sexual behaviour is damaging to themselves.
So it's not like your guide might, you're thinking
guide
of
will tell
doing
you.
something, your guide's like, bad idea, Connie, whatever the thing is. Celestial spirits are more like when you do the thing that was a bad idea, whatever it is.
See what you did and this is the result.
Yeah, kind of like bring you something so that you might, say you nailed something up wrong and then you went about your day and they're like, let's
And it fell down
engineer
and hit
it
someone.
that Corny, comes along and sees how bad that was, rather than,
So it works on your conscience more?
just like, we'll get Sandy to talk to Corny for that.
To cause people to have
A
immediate
bit longer and then he'll have to be
ideas.
there when it falls off the wall or
sort
whatever.
of like the sharing, like the sharing of ideas that you recognise in the moment.
Yeah.
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 It's sort of opportunistic.
Yeah, not
Because it
direct.
can't be direct, because
Yeah.
you don't want it to be direct. Yeah. Oh, I mean, not you.
And
but
almost
like
every celestial spirit's involved
people.
in that in some way.
Mm.
Like,
trying to help bring awareness of truth
yeah.
without being able to do it directly to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bit like Afro with the guy that bought the matches. Is
Yeah.
Yeah,
sort of
exactly.
thing.
Same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Trying to influence them in a positive direction in some way
Mm.
through circumstance, which is not the same as guiding you.
Yeah.
Yeah, guiding you as somebody who's actually with you a lot, trying to educate you, inspire you, get you to see what's happening here and what's happening there, and see you were unloving there and see you were loving there, and things like that.
Mm.
Yeah, that's more the role of a guide.
Jesus and I often can feel when we meet someone who has a divine love guide. It's there's
Yeah.
a different feeling from
Mm.
the guide than from
Yeah.
most other people. Yeah.
And then we can also feel where there's guides that are trying to opportunistically influence you under certain circumstances. That we say, look at that, see what happened there? Like, that spirit was trying to help that person and that person just didn't even clock it whatsoever. You don't see, a lot of people don't see what is happening, unfortunately.
Mm.
And I really think that until you want your own relationship with God, you can't have, emotionally, you don't have a divine love guide.
No attraction.
No, and there's probably only a few exceptions to that, and one would be if there's family members from your history
Yes.
who are divine love guides.
Who you are.
They're usually interested in their
Yeah.
families, so they try to influence you,
Yeah.
things like that. But if it comes to there being none, then generally you won't have one until you've made the shift.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We were up the back, weren't we? Sorry.
Valentin?
No,
Denise?
Denise. That's right. I can see you from
wanted to thank Francesco and yourself both for that, because it was bringing home to me exactly what our resistance to change, what our thoughts can do. And even if we have a bit of an insight in that something can be better, your life can be happy, we're still so dogged as hanging on to what we know. Because we don't, we don't want to have an idea of what we'll have to go through to see that change. So thank you so much for that. It was just so evident when he was taking on the information and felt the information that you have, that how his desire became more evident, that he was truly desirous of helping in the sixth sphere rather than back on earth, how that changed once he took on that truth. So
I feel that'll change over the coming weeks as well for him, because he'll go through different emotions, and that will all change as well.
Yeah.
The important thing to understand from your own perspective is that when you have emotional beliefs that you don't want to give up, you generally have attached your worth to them. You've attached your belief and your worth to them. And when you attach your worth to something quite significantly, you will find it very, very hard to give up unless you're very humble. The key is to not attach your worth, your worthiness, to what you believe. And that is a very difficult thing to do on earth, because most people approve of you connecting your belief to their belief. So in other words, they give you worthy feelings to validate that your belief is now correct. Right? And that then establishes in you a feeling of worth when you have that belief. So if you believe you're a kind person, and you're really not, but you believe you are, and your mum and dad told you are, and your worth's attached to that, when somebody tells you you're an unkind person, you're going to find it hard to even listen to, because your worth's attached to the belief that you're a kind person, even when you're not, right? And this is the same when it comes to spiritual beliefs. Like if your worth is attached to the fact that you're a Christian, then of course you're going to find it very hard to give up Christianity.
Most people on earth have worth attached to just how you fold the washing and how you change the tyre and how this is how Dad taught me this way or Mum taught me this way, and they told me I was really good when I did it this way, and so I must be good doing it this way. And so
just when I washed up the dishes straight after I finished the meal.
Yeah, that's right. And how you do almost everything is, as a child, your parents have a tendency of, you're a good boy because you did that. You're a bad boy or bad girl because you did that. And it's very funny sometimes when we visit people's houses, because they then ask, what's going on, what do you feel about things? And the first thing I do is look at them and say, you're a very illogical person. Like, all the things you're doing in your home that don't make any loving sense. And they get so defensive just about that little comment about their home, let alone themselves, because their worth is attached to their home. I think Phoebe can remember that experience quite well. And it happens all the time when we're travelling, like people ask us things and we just and if I can't make a comment to you about how you do something you do without your worth being involved, how am I going to make a comment about how you do something that's actually revolving around major issues of love? That's going to be pretty hard, isn't it? Yeah. Without you getting really angry. And the level of rage is directly proportional to how much you put your worth in it. When you have not attached your worth to a belief, you will give up your beliefs. When you realise they're untrue, you'll give them up very easily. The problem is, on earth, we've been rewarded for attaching our worth to a belief by our parents, firstly, and then by school, secondly. And we're rewarded to attach your worth to this belief. And this happens, every culture does it, every society does it, in all different ways too. You go to any culture on earth, pretty much, they always think they're the best culture. Pretty much. Like, go to America, they think they're the best culture. You go to Russia, they think they're the best culture. And they look down upon the Americans, and the Americans look down upon You come to Australia and we think we're the best culture and we're better than Portugal or Ireland or whatever. And pretty much everyone on earth has that. Why is that? Because they've attached their worth to being an Australian or an American do you know what I mean? Yeah. There's all sorts of ways in which you've attached your worth to things that are all out of harmony with love and stop you from loving. stop you from treating everybody equally.
Okay, thank you.
Just let me just pause.
Yeah, we'll just have a drink. All right, should we come down to Helena and then to Eloisa?
So regarding what Corny brought up about how celestial spirits, you explained, are trying to influence circumstances in our lives, you mentioned sexual immorality.
Yep.
Could you give an example of that? Do they say, oh, look at the STD you got, or
Yeah.
yeah, something as simple as
Yeah,
that?
well,
Or
look at what happened there. You're now in an abusive relationship with a guy. How did you get yourself there?
Or they might bring you someone, you know, like bring you in contact with someone who goes, Helena, I see you're always in these abusive relationships, you know, what I feel concerned for you, you know, have you thought about why that is?
like you guys.
Well, it can be almost anybody, can't it?
Yeah.
Sort of like, you know, it can even be a child.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of times you see that too. It's like, why do you do that, mummy?
Yeah.
Why did you do that, mummy? Didn't you lie to that next door neighbour, mummy? Why did the child say that?
Right.
Well,
Because quite often in the moment they can be influenced by somebody to say it. Do you know what I mean? And so they say it. And so a lot of correction, you could say, of behaviour occurs through these, what you would call incidental things, incidents that occur that are not to do with guidance so much as just trying to help a person get to the point where they want to be guided.
or, you know, often intervening in your safety, in those, obviously there's limitations, depending on how much you're engaging your will towards something that's damaging towards you, but often if you think back on your life when really terrible things have happened, there's been many, if you'll find as you progress that you'll remember, oh my gosh, there was that thing that happened where I was almost offered a different choice, and if I had have taken it, that thing wouldn't have happened. And you know, many times there's a number of those things that have happened, but obviously celestial spirits will never override your will. You know, they'll never sort of force you out of you using your will in a certain way, but often
and they won't try to provide magical experiences. Like another spirit might.
They're not going to save you or whisk you away.
No, because they want you to understand, even if you do end up passing as a result of what's happened, that your will is a really important thing for you to learn about and use in a loving way so that bad things don't happen in future, you know. Whereas if they whisk you away, you're like, oh, this is great, I just go along in life and everything seems to work out. And, you know, you never actually have to examine how you're engaging with your will.
Yeah.
But often they provide you with opportunities to, like choices. Oh, here's where I could make a different choice, you know. Yeah. But they're compassionate when even you don't take them, because they understand how these things happen.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah.
And they're persistent and patient as well. You know, like if they give you one choice and you don't take it, well, pretty likely you'll get another one somewhere, you know. Unless a person's very hardened, you know, then they won't be involved generally.
Thanks.
Yeah, Bill?
I just want to clarify between beliefs and worth.
Yeah.
When you were first born, you don't really have a sense of your own worth, do you?
Or any beliefs.
And so that's where then your beliefs are instilled through your family, and then the worth comes because someone gives you approval or
Correct.
a feeling of you're doing good, or this is what good girls do.
Correct.
This is what good boys do.
Correct.
Well, this is how you're safe and you belong to.
Yeah, this is how you belong to our family.
Yeah.
You agree with us.
And so then you learn, okay, if I do that, and then that's how your belief is formed. Because you go...
And your worth.
And, yes,
And this is why a lot of people's worth is very fragile. Because you take away their belief and they don't have any worth anymore.
Yeah, because it's not real worth, is it?
That's right.
It's all fake.
It's all fake because it's all given by approval and addiction, yeah.
Yeah.
So you don't end up with a real concept of your own worth, and you also don't end up with any beliefs that are really of value either. So yeah, it's very tricky.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you end up in a circumstance or situation where you're attached so heavily to certain concepts and beliefs that you fundamentally feel are true. And you don't realise that mostly it's because you feel your worth is attached to those things as well. And then when somebody confronts them, instead of going, oh yeah, that's right, I'm not being very logical there, you go, what the hell are you talking about? And you get so upset and so annoyed with the person. When actually, if you had a clear disconnect between worth and belief, you would actually be able to see quite clearly where your false beliefs are.
And this is because I know this has happened to me recently. This is why it's hard to even know what the belief is, because you go into that immediate panic and an immediate I need the approval back. I need the approval.
I need the
back.
reassurance that my belief was okay.
And so that's part of the process, isn't it? You've got to kind of go through that
Yep.
to realise that you've even got a belief, that you don't even understand your belief. And then, because I know you've been talking about beliefs, but I'm finding it hard to even find the beliefs.
Yeah, although for you, a lot of them are not what I call concepts of God. They've been more concepts of self, concepts of family, concepts of what a woman should do in a relationship. You know what I mean? For you, concepts of God were not as strong indoctrination in your family?
No, so it's been easier to give those ones up and sort of begin a relationship with God, but then the self, what you were talking about at the beginning, about the self-image and the image of God, those two are the most important things.
Yeah, and so if you've got a whole lot of concepts of self that are all attached to your worth, even if you've got a concept of God that's true, you're going to find it so hard to receive counsel and to actually change yourself, because you'll be so addicted to keeping the same concepts of self.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so the process, really, a lot of the process, what I've found myself is that the more you can disconnect your current beliefs from your current worth, the faster you'll make some significant gains in your progress.
Yeah.
But every time you're attached with your beliefs to your worth, you'll find those are the areas that you're going to find progress much more difficult. Yeah. And a lot of it is about what you believe makes you a good person. Like, there's a whole set of beliefs there that you've attached your worth to, and it's pretty tough giving them up emotionally.
Yeah.
Very tough. But you have to.
The
in
quicker
order to,
you do it, the better
yeah,
it
the
is.
quicker you do it, the better.
Yeah.
Mm.
Thank you.
Now, Valentin, you had your hand up? Yep. And then down to Rob in front of you.
About the music, it also can be that I feel like I can connect my worth to self punishment. It's really strange, but I get a feeling of worth from somehow.
From self-punishing?
From
this is a common thing in childhood because parents don't like themselves when they punish you. So what they want you to do when you do something wrong, what they believe is wrong, is they want you to punish yourself rather than them having to punish you. You understand?
Yeah.
And so a parent who's done that will generally try to indoctrinate you into a process of punishing yourself, and then what they'll do is they'll give you approval for doing it. So this now attaches worth to your process of self-punishment.
And there's then also I need to have to want to give that up.
Yes.
And
Yes.
also I realize that there's this arrogance issue kind of thing, almost that I want to
It's like, I'm a good person for punishing myself. Can't you see how good I am because I'm punishing myself? That kind of thing.
agrees. God doesn't agree. I guess.
Yeah, you sort of want God to agree. I punish myself, so you should love me now. Yeah. Just like my mum and dad did. Yeah. But of course, your mum and dad didn't. They just gave you approval for that behaviour.
And often when that's happened in our childhood, we sort of, if you like, approach God with this self-punishment and like, God, you should be pleased, and also, God, you should take away the consequences of everything that I've done, because I'm punishing myself
That's what my mum
so
and
bad.
dad did when I punished myself.
And that's what Mum and Dad did. They said, okay, you're off the hook now. You feel terrible about yourself.
That's good.
Yeah.
Now we'll
You don't
forgive
have to
you.
clean up the mess, you know.
Yeah, you don't have to clean up the mess. You don't have to fix it. You don't have to change yourself anymore. Just feel morose for a while and feel like you're a bad person for a while, and we'll agree with you, and then we think that's great.
And so it can lead to the sort of this arrogance, but also a frustration with God that, oh, my life's still not getting better, and I'm punishing the hell out of myself here. You know, why isn't this working?
Why aren't you rewarding me for
Yes.
it? You know?
Yeah.
Why aren't you giving me all this approval?
Why do I still have to fix this mess that my life is, or why, you know, work hard, or face difficult situations. You know.
Makes sense? Valentin?
Yeah.
Rob?
When he was on Earth, James Paget at some point was able to educate spirits that were in a higher sphere than himself.
Were they in a higher sphere than himself? The ones he educated?
I thought so. But maybe
Well, you can see he knew the belief about God, didn't he? That spirits even in the sixth sphere don't know.
yeah.
So he could only educate people who didn't know what he knew.
Yeah, that's the point. Yeah.
Now, some of those people were in a higher sphere because they were more loving than he was.
Yeah.
But he couldn't educate them on how to be more loving than he was.
No, only
Wasn't
about
they were.
divine love.
Yes.
And also only about the concept of it, not about the reality of it.
Okay.
Just encouraging them to seek for it
Yeah.
was often enough for them to experience it, because they were, even by
Humble
nature
enough.
of the fact that they were more loving, they were more humble and more open to hearing the truth about it.
Correct.
Right. So,
Like Francesco just
but he
was.
must have had a point. He must have had a pretty solid. This is true.
Yes.
Within himself. you
Yes.
know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
A faith.
Mm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Not even though he personally was not doing the loving things that the love in him dictated.
Right.
He frequently was still living in his own addictions, of course. But because he had a very, very firm belief that it was true,
And he had received some of God's love.
and he had received some of God's love, so he knew it was true, he could actually be very firm about that fact
Yeah.
to these spirits who did not believe that fact.
Mm.
Yeah.
So is there any value in us doing that when we get to that point?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
And people lower than us and stuff like that as well. People in the,
Yeah, well, you don't even feel about people lower than you or higher than you. You just feel about whether they know about it or not,
Whether
you
they
know,
know, yeah.
fundamentally.
Yeah. I'm talking about people who are attacking, like.
Yeah, well, even then, you don't look at, the more love you receive and the more loving you become, the less you see attack as a problem. Like,
Right.
the more you sort of see it as, oh, okay, if I've got an opportunity with that person, I'll take the opportunity. Now, obviously, an attacking person doesn't often give you opportunities,
Mm.
but
Sure.
if they do, then you take it to share the truth with them, you know.
Mm.
The fact that they're attacking you means they're engaging with you. So why not share some truth?
Yeah, and there's something in the thing that's bringing them to me as well.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, so but you won't sort of see it as, oh, I'm better than you because I know this.
No.
You'll sort of see it, well, you don't know this and it's really important to know.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. So across to Tara and then down to Ulf on this side.
I just had a question about the self-punishment.
Yep.
And just the flip side of that.
Yep.
If you had parents who didn't encourage the self-punishment but punished you.
Yes.
So,
Yeah, I wouldn't call that the flip side of the other though.
okay.
Yeah, it's just another form of controlling you that parents had, yeah.
Mm.
Yep.
So in terms of physical abuse.
Yes.
Yeah, I was just wondering what kind of self-worth, like false beliefs about
Well,
self-worth.
then your tendency is to have a very low sense of your own worth because there was no reward and only punishment. And under those circumstances, generally you have a habit of putting yourself down in almost every situation, treating yourself as lesser than other people in almost every situation, treating yourself as if you're not as worthy as other people, in other words, not equal to other people, but lower than other people. You have a tendency to accept bad treatment of yourself in the future because of that.
Shame.
And have a tendency to believe you're a shameful person.
Sort of, when something abusive or bad happens to you, in those circumstances that you're describing, there's a tendency to believe it was because of something
you did
in me, that I was deserving of that, and that then manifests in your life as sort of a feeling of shame about sharing yourself or being yourself because there's something wrong with me, and that's why this bad thing happened to me.
In other words, you come to believe that you're to blame for other people's poor treatment of you.
Yeah, that's more like if I did something like as a child that your parents said was naughty, and they're physically harming you because you've done something naughty. That was
I don't know. There's also a bit of a thing inside of children as well that even if as a child, if you were physically harmed by your parents, the real hurt is where you believed it was unjust. Where you believed it was not so much unjust, generally you have less pain and suffering about it.
Sort of like,
So,
you mean, can I clarify what you're saying?
Mhm.
You mean if
I'm not saying
did,
it's good, I'm just
no.
saying this is how it is.
But if I did do something that was mean or nasty or bad as a kid,
To somebody, and
as
you
a
got
kid,
punished for
and
it.
I got punished physically or in some
verbally,
way, or verbally,
whatever, for it.
there's less pain and suffering associated that than if, say, Dad came home, he had a really bad day and he just took it out on
when
me.
he walked in the door.
Yeah. Or he was upset with Mum, but he didn't want to have a fight with Mum, so he
Took it out on me.
was aggressive with me or something. Yeah.
Those kind of events usually have more powerful effect because there's an internal feeling of what is righteous inside of most people too, and whenever something feels unrighteous, not right, there's a stronger emotional reaction generally. Yeah. Particularly when your worth's associated with it.
Yeah, and I have memories of being disciplined in that way, but I can't remember what I did. So I'm also wondering why,
Well, probably you didn't do anything wrong. You know what I mean? A person who's had parents who punish the child just for disagreeing with the parent and without there being much other reason for it, generally most of the children never did anything wrong. And so a lot of times you don't have a memory because you probably didn't do anything wrong that you clocked yourself. You know what I mean? All that you clocked was the fact that Mum and Dad hated you for something and treated you in a hateful manner about whatever that thing was, but you can't even remember the thing because in the end there was no internal thing telling you that it was wrong. Yeah. Very common, Tara. The key is to feel through the abusive behaviour and to come to see that it's not your fault, and then feel about the fact that it was made to be your fault when it wasn't your fault. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, I believe I have a lot of belief about myself connected to my self-worth.
Yep.
And I've usually exposed them and in an unloving manner.
Yeah.
And I can also intellectually see that I have to disconnect those beliefs from my self-worth. But how do I do it emotionally? Is that just to awaken to the sin about it? Or?
Well, yeah, it's a very good question. A person in your position frequently finds it difficult, and the reason why is you've been taught to be very intellectual and to be prideful about your intellect in your life. And this is a very common Swedish thing we've found too, that many Swedes are quite prideful of their education and their intellect, the strength of the logic of their intellect. And when you've been brought up in this manner to sort of believe that your intellect is all powerful, it's very hard then to feel very settled with actually working through something in an emotional manner. And in fact, you'll find that you've got a lot of judgments about your emotions and people's emotions generally that you'll first need to address. So that's the first step. You need to start working through what you believe the truth to be about emotion. You have a feeling that all emotion is bad, you know, and not just, when I say all emotion, all uncontrolled emotion. And this is something that we also notice in many countries. Some countries have a very strong feeling that an emotional person, you know, if you're an emotional person in Italy, you're allowed to be, to a degree, even though it might be flamboyant exaggeration, you're allowed to be. But if you're an emotional person in England, you're not allowed to be. You know, that's not a good thing. Stoicism is the rule of the day, right? When you're brought up with these beliefs, your worth is attached to your intellectual prowess and your stoicism. In other words, you feel that any emotional action on your part, any emotional reaction on your part is a weakness. Make sense? And unless you address this feeling that it's a weakness to deal with something emotionally, it's going to be very hard to actually emotionally deal with the things that you need to deal with. Yeah. And so the very first thing you're going to need to do is pray a lot to God about the concept you have about emotion and about it being weakness and something to be looked down upon and ridiculed almost, you know. And you'll find in that there's a lot of childhood events that would have been related to that, the establishment of those beliefs, and you'll need to address some of them. If you do that, then you can start detaching, through emotion, you can start detaching your worth from your beliefs, right? But the only way to actually detach worth from a belief is to go through an emotion. So the problem you're facing is you want to detach your worth from your beliefs because you recognise that's a problem, and it is, because you know you've attached a whole heap of beliefs that you've got, particularly about yourself, to your worth about how good you feel you are or how bad you feel you are. And you know you've done that, but the only way to disintegrate that is to go through some emotions, and you don't want to do that. So you're sort of in this place now where it's like a catch-22. There's the thing you need to do to break it all down that you're feeling you can't do to break it all down. So it's sort of like you end up in this state where what are you going to do? You're not going to change much until one thing has a breakthrough. Now, to get breakthroughs, there are a number of ways you get a breakthrough. Truth is your first point of breakthrough. In other words, facing truths, God's truths. So, very important. God's truths, breakthrough. Humility is another point of breakthrough. So it's understanding the concepts of humility and truth. And the third point of breakthrough is faith. Having faith that what you think and feel right now about emotion is not true. Again, and so these are the things to pray for. Humility, truth, and faith. Right?
And go. Well, my advice to you, if I was to give you an advice, would be to also take some action that challenges you on those 3 points. So what I observe is that you lead a very controlled life and you exert a lot of control over things when you're involved in them. But being in environments where there is more truth, which means there's less addictions being met for you, is going to help stir you up emotionally, and then you have the opportunity to be humble. When you live a very controlled life, you limit the truth that comes to you, to what you will allow, and and as a result, you also limit the amount you're stretched emotionally. Whereas you can make conscious choices to stay engaged in situations that you believe are loving and truthful and challenge your addictions. Stay engaged even when it's uncomfortable, because then your emotions start to be exposed and you have more choices around humility. This is something that I have done a lot, coming from a very stoic upbringing in this life, to have to stay engaged in situations where I feel very challenged. I can even start to feel the fight I have of emotion, or feel the judgment I have of my own emotion, or feel how my worth is being torn down. Staying engaged in those situations is the way that I've had breakthroughs. And this is something where I see you get to a point and you step back, go back into addiction, and it's going to be very hard to break through in that methodology, you know. Were you going to say more about it?
No, it's just something we've noticed you do a lot, Ulf, and Anna too. Both of you step away from circumstances that challenge you a lot. Like you lead a very controlled life in that regard, and there's others here that do the same. And it's if you step back from challenging situations emotionally, it's driven by your desire to avoid the challenging situation because of the emotions that it triggers. And you know, it's far better to step forward into them than step away from them.
And as someone who did this dance, where I'd step away, I never made any progress. If anything, I would regress, and then I'd have to get engaged, and make the breakthrough beyond that point. So every time you step back, you're actually limiting yourself. You rationalise that you're just doing what, you know, is logical,
and also
what's
loving
good,
to yourself.
and what's loving to yourself. And it's not just you guys. We witness lots of people doing this. And I've done it myself, but the only way to break through is to stay engaged, see the truth, take the opportunity for humility, even if initially it's just frustration.
Is all you feel.
Is all you feel. That is starting to help you break down this concept of yourself that, no, I'm fine, and I'm just in control, and stoicism gives me my worth. Even your frustration causes you to question, well, this is not working so well.
Yeah.
My worth is being challenged.
Yeah. If I can give you an illustration, which you've heard me give before, I think. Every problem you face is like a wall. When you come up to a wall physically, what do?
Climb over it or knock it down.
If you really want to get through, you do, don't you?
Yeah.
That's what you do, isn't it?
Yeah.
You climb over it and knock it down. Do you step back from it?
Well, not if you want to get through it.
That's right. So you've also got to consider your motivation to get through it. See, if you step back from a situation every time you're confronted with one, then you've got to consider, am I really motivated to make the change that I need to make here? You understand? So my approach with a wall is you sit in front of it until you either got a way to get over it or got a way to get through it. You don't go back from it. And I used to say this to Mary all the time. You keep going back from it, then you're going to have to come up to it again and again and again and again. And you're going to go like this for years on end if you're not careful. And by the way, when you do that, each time you approach the wall, you think it's worse. Right? When you do it that way. So you end up inflaming the height of the wall and the breadth of the wall. You know,
To yourself.
Even to yourself, the problem of the wall becomes bigger than the wall actually is. You know, so you end up sort of almost imagining it's bigger when it's small. So a person who is truly desirous of progress, you'll find there's many walls in front of you towards your progress. Some of them will be spiritual, some emotional, some sexual, some physical. And you need to have the approach that I'm going to scale these walls or knock them down one way or the other. I'm going to get through them, right? And when you have the ability to just sit there in a state of frustration for weeks on end before you do it, then you know you're not running away, right? But most people, when it comes to frustration, that's when they go, oh, I'm sick of this. I'm back doing what I was going to do, you know, like I want to step away. I want to rationalise it. It's kinder to myself to step away now, you know, rather than stay in a state of turmoil until you've solved the problem. Yeah. Most people don't want to do that. And so it requires a certain level of dedication to yourself and to God's truth in order to stay in the place where you're in turmoil until you solve the problem. Yeah.
And coming to, as long as you're in a situation that is loving, that is truthful, you know, that is challenging an addiction, you can come to see your discomfort and your turmoil as a point of progress.
Because before you weren't even uncomfortable with that problem.
Was all the lid was firmly on, you know. Yeah.
Before you were thinking that problem wasn't even a problem. Before you even probably liked the problem.
Yep, you were proud of the problem.
You're proud of the problem.
You thought you were way better than everyone else because they, you know, you had this thing that is a problem, but you thought it's a good thing.
It's a good thing.
And they've got all these problems because they don't have this thing that I have, you know.
But once you can sit with the problem and realise it's a problem, these are all points of progression, right? And also never step away from the problem until it's resolved. Now you've got the ability to solve your problems. Yeah. And of course, that was also demonstrating, can you see, a higher desire to solve the problem, which of course then is rewarded by the law. You'll get more help to solve the problem when you're in that place as well. And that's not just help from other people. There'll be circumstances where spirits can say, see this here, see that there, see this emotion here you're feeling, and you'll get help in all of these different ways as well. Once your desire is fully expressed, now you're praying. Now you're going to get the help you need. But when you go to a problem and then step away from it, where's your prayer? Your prayer is, I don't want to handle this problem. And so naturally, what help are you going to get? Help to not handle the problem. You know, that's going to be the prayer and that's going to be the answer. When you demonstrate a strong desire to deal with things, your prayer now is, I want to deal with this problem. Help me deal with this problem. Whatever help I can get, I'm going to listen to deal with this problem.
There's no back door anymore, you know. I'm not
There's no out.
No pressure release valve.
Yeah.
It's just me and this problem now.
Yeah.
Just forward.
Yeah, and I'm moving forward. And when God can feel this level of, and the law can feel this level of passion in you to solve problems, you'll find you'll solve your problems much more rapidly. Yeah. Makes sense? Yeah. So the problem of not being emotional is a problem. Not understanding how to deal with emotions, that's a problem. So focus that as there's your first hurdle. That's your first hurdle. Once you're over that hurdle, then there's this, how do I disconnect my worth from what I believe about myself? You know, there's another problem. So then you'll be, now that you've dealt with the emotion problem, and you've not got so much judgment about emotion, now you can use your emotions to solve that problem. Yeah. So there are some problems that are going to be able to be solved in sequence, need to be solved in sequence, and God is usually also, through the law of attraction, bringing you those problems that you need to solve first.
Yeah.
So if you think about the problem of the emotion, this is a problem you've been confronted with for some time now. So it is something God's trying to say, deal with this first, deal with this first, deal with this first. You're not going to be able to get anywhere else unless you deal with this first. So deal with that, treat it as a problem, but stay with it. Stay with the problem. Exercise the desire to be with it until the point that your feeling is a prayer. Like your feeling is, I want the resolution of this thing.
Okay, thank you very much.
Pleasure. I need to have a wee, so probably most of you do, and it's already 4:45. So maybe we should finish there, I think, for today. And thank you for coming to our first.
Hopefully this is the first of very many times we can hang out together. And we'll have a longer time next time because we were a bit